that it's true. It's like one of those things that seems trivially easy to explain, but it's such an easy error to make when you're actually having a discussion.
Isaac, do you feel that you talk to a lot of people who are sincerely interested in discussing ethics for the sake of ethics?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay. My feeling is that most people, what they care about is feeling important, feeling smart, feeling good, feeling self-esteem, feeling pride. And that's one of the reasons why I think talking about virtue ethics, I think virtue ethics appeals to people because of it's not as ethical. It appeals more to egoism. And I just think it's very rare to talk to people. I mean, like even what you were just mentioning, derailing into meta-ethics, I think it shows a fundamental lack of interest in ethics.
Yeah, because for example, you can have someone who they know how to riff on a few meta-ethical topics and they just want to flex their muscle about fucking metaphysical properties or realism or some shit like this, and it's all just an ego thing. So yeah, I know what you're talking about. I've seen that. That's for real. But I guess what I'm saying, I'm not making a statistical statement about like, of all the people I interact with, some really high percentage of them are genuinely interested in ethics. It's more like a statement where I talk to so many fucking people that for sure,
right,
even if it's a radical minority, there's still enough people that are legitimately interested in ethics that I can say I talk to a lot of people who are legitimately interested in ethics. You know what I mean?
So again, this
is
totally
a lot of people who are over 6 foot tall. It's not that a big percentage of people are over 6 foot tall, but if I have a job where I talk to like thousands of people a day, then of course I talk to a lot of them, even if they're a minority of the overall people I talk to. So I don't think there's a tension between what we're saying.
Totally agree, totally understand. And another good comparison is if you work in a sneaker store, you meet a lot of people with size 13 shoes or whatever, depending on what lane you're in. I think a lot of people don't appreciate, like, it's very rare to talk to a lot of vegans. I've now talked to thousands and thousands of vegans over the last 5 years because of what I'm doing. Hey, so I just asked this is totally, open-ended question. It's not a gotcha question or something. Do you find the same kind of thing when you talk to people on the street? Because I know you've done some street activism with street activist groups.
By the same thing, you mean, do I find that people I talk to on
the
street,
do you think they're really interested in ethics as such, or do you think it's something else that's the hook that gets them in?
I think that they have a legitimate interest, but that's also because the type of activism I do, when I do it, there's a selection, there's like a filter there. So I've only really done activism with AV. And with AV, the people who actually stay and watch a cow being slaughtered in front of them, usually some good percentage of people who are actually going to sit there for that and like just stand and watch it actually do care. So that's not to say the average person on the street has some deep ethical concerns, but when you select out a chunk of people who will stand there and watch that, some significant portion of them actually seem to be concerned about ethics.
Right. And what's recently just kind of shocked me about the role of egoism. I mean, I don't feel I was underestimating the importance of egoism, but lately I've been talking to this guy, Faraday Speaks. Faraday Speaks had... Okay, so Faraday Speaks had one hit YouTube video, and it was covered by CNN, the New York Times. You got the front page of the New York Times.
Let's just give context here. For anyone who doesn't know, this is the video that the guy made about how he fell down the alt-right rabbit hole, and then he came out of it from listening to Destiny and Lauren Southern.
Right. So the story itself is not why I'm mentioning the anecdote, but he had a story about how the actual title of the video or the thumbnail said how he became racist. So he was dealing with that he had a period where he became more and more right-wing and more racist from watching YouTube videos. But that was front page of the New York Times, as well as having CNN and other mainstream press coverage. And the number of viewers that mainstream press coverage drove to his YouTube channel was almost zero. It was unbelievable how little viewership that drove his channel. And that made me sit back and think, wow. Because I remember I've been doing the vegan YouTube game before you came on the scene. And it used to be if there was like some really crappy coverage of veganism by Oprah or by like an Australian newspaper or by a British, like one of the British morning talk show hosts, all of those would drive so much traffic to like the whole vegan ecosystem, but also the particular YouTubers mentioned. And it really made me stop and think, wow, those people, like the front page of the New York Times is not as powerful as weight loss. That like I've been underestimating the extent to which all interest in our movement is underwritten by or supported by Vanity.
Yeah, I don't. I guess there's a specific question about like what accounts for people not coming over from the mainstream media, and I don't know if it's just that they, I'm not sure about that, but I want to ask you one thing about virtue ethics. Like, I know that there clearly is some kind of virtue component to your ethical system, but surely there is also a consequential component, right? Like,
sure.
Yeah, so like any question where you say you shouldn't do this thing because it's not virtuous, if I make the consequences bad enough, like,
So I can argue against myself on this. I think so. I mean, like, to attack myself more vigorously. If someone had a virtue ethics that had no connection to real world consequences, then by definition they would be. It would be like someone who paints paintings and thinks they're the greatest painter in the world, but nobody wants to buy the paintings and nobody wants to see them. It would be an ego trip detached from reality, right?
Well, I think you're probably a threshold virtue ethic.
Sure. Yeah, sure. It just doesn't come up much. I mean, how often do you have to deal with somebody who thinks they're a really great artist, but nobody wants to buy or see their work? And how often do you deal with somebody who thinks they're a great athlete or fashion model? I mean, I think we did within the vegan movement sometimes. It's just most often any kind of virtue is linked to real world utility or outcomes in some way without you having to argue for it.
I agree. It's just a philosophical thing. Because a person who's philosophically minded will be like, okay, is virtue necessarily coupled to those components? If it's not, then I can pick a situation where virtue is met, the consequences are really bad. And then if the guy just cares about virtue, he has to not care that the consequences are bad.
Right. So a great example.
That's just like a philosophy thing, though. I'm sure, like it's kind of like in real life, there's going to be overlap most of the time. Virtuous things will have good consequences.
Right. Well, I think a great example is vegan activism itself. And to throw in a really quick parallel, something like the Vietnam War. You can meet and talk to people who really sincerely signed up to fight in the Vietnam War because they felt the people of Vietnam should have democracy and freedom of speech and be able to vote and elect their government. And then what they actually got involved with in the Vietnam War might have been rape and torture and massacres. What they actually did in the Vietnam War might be, shall we say, not so virtuous. And, I have people writing to me every day from different angles. Just lately, for whatever reason, I had a bunch more people writing to me. It's not constant, but it comes in ebbs and flows. I had a bunch more people writing to me about their negative experiences with vegan activism. Because, obviously they got involved, for ethical reasons, and they had a certain idea of themselves as being virtuous or becoming virtuous. And at some point, they got to look back and say, what am I doing here? What's this all about?
So I have a question for you, and I have a statement. So the statement is, you got to change your name. À-bas-le-ciel on YouTube is the most boomery thing I've ever seen. You can actually, just for the record, attach your YouTube account to your Discord account so someone can get to it just by clicking your profile. And then the other thing, I was going to ask, who do you think is the worst person involved in veganism right now?
Okay, so for the record, my nickname here was Slayer of Ewoks. But you changed it, and I was busy, and I just changed it back without paying too much attention. So I'm happy to change my nickname back to Slayer of Ewoks. I'll keep the Ewoks meme going. Who is the worst person in veganism right now? Spherage.
Okay, I'm the worst person on the side of me.
Oh, gee. I got sympathy. I got sympathy for all the terrible people, across the board. But you know what? You know who it probably is? Honestly, it's probably Jeff Nelson. It's probably who it is right now. Both.
Vegsource?
Yes. So Vegsource, yes, that's right. So I guess the reason for my saying Jeff Nelson is both if you look at what he is doing and what he's not doing. So like the negative impact he's having and also the tremendous potential or ability he has to do something positive. And that's not happening, that's being squandered. So yeah, you may not know, but lately he's engaged in one dishonest squabble after another, attacking the credibility of different vegan medical doctors and claiming that he's standing up for science versus pseudoscience, and it's really janky. So yeah, he has a long history of this, and he took me on too, denouncing me publicly and stuff too, which is not that big a deal. I mean, but still. He has this long, weird history of being a kind of drama queen. And the thing is, he does have a kind of position of privilege and influence and power, partly because he's based in L.A. He's the guy who organizes the annual L.A. Veg Fest, and partly because he's been in the game for so long. He ran the website Vegsource before he came on YouTube. So yeah, that's an influential, powerful person who has been, I guess, a bad actor in political science terms.
What is, just with the vegan doctors, what's the claim that he is like, or one of the claims that he is opposing them on?
Well, so it's one thing after another, but recently, for example, he tried to make a big deal out of accusing the doctors of being motivated by selling supplements, and that the doctors are lying about the health benefits for vegans taking, I believe, DHA supplements, some of those special fat supplements and things like that, attacking doctors for allegedly being self-interest and money motivated. He had another series of videos.
I'm just looking at his channel. There's like so much about doctors here.
That's right. That's right. And the funny thing is, it's also, I'm sure you realize, you're just looking at it now, ostensibly, it seems very, well motivated and right, like in terms of your prima facie reaction, you just see the titles of the videos and think, oh wow, this is probably really important, this critique of something wrong in medical science. And then the other irony is, I just did a video criticizing Jeff for the diet he and his daughters now promote. He and his daughters together promote a very peculiar diet, and there are problems with it. There are scientific problems, and in terms of the effects on people's lives, there are problems too, because my girlfriend just went through it.
What's the diet?
Well, the diet, what they did was, the reason why, so just to be clear, the diet is co-written by his daughters and in reality him. He's very much the force behind it, and it also has kind of introductions and comments and endorsements from various more famous medical authorities. And it promises to be the diet that will cure acne. And obviously it's primarily for a female readership. So in terms of what, I'm going to answer the question, what is the diet though? They basically took Dr. McDougall's most extreme diet and made it a little bit more extreme. Because McDougall, he has more than one diet depending on what your situation is. But McDougall has one diet that's called something like the diet for maximum weight loss, like for people who are really trying to shed a lot of weight, which is, so anyway, McDougall has a range of recommendations, but it is one of McDougall's recommendations, and then they step it up even further and add an elimination element to it. So, for example, it starts off being a very, very low fruit diet. You have a very limited amount of fruit you can eat every day, but then if it's not working, you eliminate fruit entirely. And in the same way, you eliminate and eliminate. It becomes more and more extreme if you're not getting the results you want. But the promise that it'll cure acne, given that acne is hormonal for a very significant percentage of women, it's going to lead to a downward spiral for a lot of women. So there are problems with it. And I just went through that with my girlfriend.
Surely if you're going to make a claim like this diet cures acne, you should have some kind of data.
Right. So, they do. The thing is with acne is one symptom caused by many things. So, if you have acne because...
Sorry, I actually have to hop.
Cool. Good, man. Great chat. Yeah.